Okay, so let's dive into something I think we all struggle with sometimes. That feeling when you want to improve your spoken English. But there's that fear of making mistakes, holding you back.
Yeah.
Like that little knot of fear. We're going to take this awesome list that you shared, which has ton relatable situations where this fear pops up, and use it for today's deep dive.
Cool.
And the cool thing is we'll discover some creative ways to turn those oops moments into confidence boosts.
Yeah, it's amazing how much our emotions can play a role when we're learning a language.
Right.
These scenarios really highlight that side of things.
When I first saw this list, this first one made me laugh out loud because I've totally been there.
Oh, yeah.
It's that classic mix-up we all dread.
Oh, no.
You're in a meeting trying to, project that I'm super focused vibe, and instead of saying concentrated, you blurt out, I'm very constipated. Like, can you picture the look on everyone's faces?
Oh, my God.
I'm cringing just thinking about it.
Oh, the dreaded word mix-up. But honestly, these slips of the tongue happen to even the most fluent speakers.
Really?
It's like our brains are trying to juggle so much information at once that sometimes the wires get crossed.
Yeah.
Especially when we're under pressure.
So it's not just me.
Not at all.
Okay, that's actually kind of reassuring.
Yeah.
But what can we do about it?
Well,
The list suggests making fun flashcards with words that are easily confused and practicing with a friend, turning it into a game.
right.
What do you think about that approach?
I think turning practice into a game is a brilliant idea to take the pressure off.
Right.
Because laughter creates such a positive and relaxed environment,
Yeah.
which is crucial when you're learning.
Yeah.
When you can laugh at your mistakes, they lose their power to hold you back.
That's true.
Plus, having a friend involved adds a level of accountability and support.
Yeah, it makes it more fun, too.
For sure.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, moving on to something I definitely struggle with. Have you ever been telling a story in English and suddenly frozen, totally unsure if you should use was or were?
Uh-huh.
It's like your brain just hits a wall.
Yeah.
And that fear of using the wrong tense just takes over.
No.
The list calls this overthinking grammar paralysis. I think we've all been there.
Yeah, overthinking grammar is a really common challenge.
Yeah.
Especially for people who are used to more structured language learning environments.
Right.
It's like the fear of making a grammatical error overshadows the message that you're actually trying to convey.
Yeah, that's so true.
And fluency in spoken English often means prioritizing clear communication over perfect grammar,
Oh, okay.
which would be tough to embrace.
Can you tell us a bit more about why this happens?
Sure.
Is there something about the way our brains process language that makes us get stuck on grammar?
Absolutely. When we learn a new language, we tend to focus on the rules and structures first,
Right.
which is important for building that foundation.
Yeah.
But as we progress, we need to shift our focus from accuracy to fluency. The 5-sentence story challenge from the list is a great way to practice this.
Okay.
So by limiting yourself to 5 sentences, you force yourself to prioritize the essence of the story
Okay.
and let go of the need to be grammatically perfect.
Got it. Okay. Next up is a scenario that's both awkward and kind of hilarious.
Right.
Picture this. You're at a restaurant and you can't for the life of you remember the English word for fork.
Oh, no.
What do? You start miming, holding an imaginary fork while the waiter gives you this confused look. The list calls this talking with hands. It's happened to me way more times than I'd like to admit.
I think we've all been there.
Oh, yeah.
Nonverbal communication is a powerful tool, but it can lead to some pretty funny misunderstandings,
It really can.
especially across cultures.
Right. That's so
Right.
true. So what does the list suggest for these situations?
Well, it recommends embracing the charades.
Oh, okay.
So carrying a small notebook with you with common object names in English
Right.
and practicing describing those items in fun ways, using gestures,
Right.
turning it into a game.
All right.
What's fascinating here is that this taps into a different part of your brain. It links the word with a physical action and a visual image.
I see.
This multisensory approach can really help with memory and recall.
Okay. Love that idea. Okay, let's move on to a fear that can strike in any language.
All right.
Nervous giggles. You know that feeling when you're trying to be serious but the nerves hit?
Oh, yeah.
And you just start giggling uncontrollably,
Like a physiological response to stress.
right?
When we feel anxious, our bodies release hormones that can manifest as nervous laughter.
Interesting.
It's a totally normal reaction.
Okay, so the list recommends having a few jokes or funny icebreakers up your sleeve. I'm curious about this tip. What do you think about using humor as an icebreaker in these situations?
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It just lightens the mood and creates a sense of connection.
Right.
Sharing a laugh can instantly put both you and the other person at ease.
That's true.
So the conversation feels more natural and less intimidating.
Right.
Plus, it shows you don't take yourself too seriously,
Yeah.
which can be really disarming.
I love that thing. Okay, this next one is something I think we've all experienced at some point, pretending to understand.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when you're nodding and smiling along, but deep down you have absolutely no clue what the other person is saying.
Yeah.
I've been there so many times.
It's a natural instinct to want to avoid looking foolish.
Right?
But in the long run, pretending to understand can actually hinder your learning.
So how do we break out of this habit? What does the list suggest?
Well, it encourages practicing phrases for clarification.
Okay.
So instead of pretending, try saying things like, could you explain that again? Or I'm not sure I understand.
Right.
Asking for clarification is not a sign of weakness at all.
Mm.
It shows that you're actively engaged in the conversation
Yeah.
and eager to learn.
Yeah.
It also gives you a chance to practice your speaking and comprehension skills in real time.
That's a great point. Okay, let's shift gears to a situation that can feel particularly isolating, the silent treatment. It's that feeling of being in a group conversation,
Okay.
but staying completely silent because you're terrified of saying the wrong thing. Have you ever felt that?
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a classic example of fear holding you back.
Yeah,
You miss out on valuable opportunities to practice and connect with others.
that's so true.
But the list offers a simple yet effective way to overcome this challenge yourself. To say at least one thing per conversation, no matter how small. Just one thing. That seems manageable.
Right. It could be agreeing with someone,
Yeah?
asking a simple question,
Right.
or even just using a basic phrase like, what do you think?
Okay.
Starting small allows you to gradually build your confidence and comfort level
Right.
without feeling overwhelmed.
Okay, this next one is about the over-apologizer. I think we've all encountered this person at some point, the one who constantly apologizes for every little mistake, saying things like, sorry for my English or sorry for my accent. Yeah.
It can be well-intentioned, but sometimes it comes across as a lack of confidence.
Yeah, it's understandable to feel self-conscious.
Right.
But over-apologizing can actually undermine your confidence and make you sound less fluent than you are.
Interesting. So how do we shift this mindset? What does the list recommend?
It suggests creating a no-sorry zone.
A no-sorry zone. Yeah.
So practice having conversations without apologizing for any mistakes. Instead of saying, sorry for my English, try saying, I'm practicing my English, or I'm still learning.
Right.
This reframes your thinking to focus on the positive aspects of your language journey.
I love that reframing. All right, moving on to a pitfall that can trip up even advanced learners, the word marathon.
Oh, yeah.
This is when you try to use fancy words to sound more fluent,
Uh-huh.
but end up fumbling and losing your train of thought.
I've been there.
It's so tempting to try to impress with vocabulary,
Right.
but using words that you're not comfortable with can make you sound less natural and confident.
Totally. So how do we resist that urge to show off our fancy vocabulary?
The list suggests a plain English challenge,
Okay.
where you focus on using short, clear sentences to express your ideas. This helps you practice clarity and fluency
Yeah.
without getting bogged down in complex grammar or vocabulary.
Right.
Remember, the goal of communication is to be understood, not to sound like a walking dictionary.
That's a great point. Now, this next one can be particularly daunting, the can't keep up problem. This is when someone speaks English so fast you feel like you're in a verbal race that you can't win.
Oh man, I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Fast speakers can be challenging, especially when you're still developing your listening skills.
You're right.
But it's important to remember that you're not expected to understand every single word.
Right.
The key is to focus on the overall meaning
Okay.
and to practice strategies for handling those situations.
What kind of strategies?
Well, the list suggests two main approaches.
Okay.
First, don't be afraid to ask the speaker to slow down. You can say something like, sorry, could you speak a little slower?
Yeah.
This is perfectly acceptable.
Right.
And it shows that you're actively trying to engage the conversation.
Right.
The second tip is to focus on key words and phrases.
Okay.
You don't need to catch every word to understand the gist of what's being said.
Yeah.
Just try to identify those key words
Right.
and piece together the meaning from there.
Those are great tips. Okay, last but not least, we have the translation trap. This is when you constantly translate every word from your native language to English in your head,
Yeah.
which can cause long pauses and disrupt your flow. I definitely fall into this trap before.
It's a common habit, especially for beginners.
Right.
Our brains naturally try to find familiar patterns,
Right.
and translation feels like a safe way to navigate a new language.
Yeah.
But in the long run, it can hinder your progress.
So how do we break free from this translation trap? What does the list suggest?
Well, it suggests playing a game
Again.
where you describe things in English without using your native language at all. So, for example, instead of directly translating the word for fork,
Right.
try saying, it's the thing you use to eat spaghetti.
Right.
Or it has 4 prongs and you use it with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
This forces you to access your English vocabulary directly
Okay.
and strengthens your ability to think in the language.
Right.
Over time, it will become more natural and automatic.
So it's like
Yeah,
we're kind of creating a shortcut in our brain.
exactly.
Instead of going through that extra step of translation, we're building that direct
Yeah,
connection
exactly.
between the concept and the English word.
Yeah,
So we've just explored these 10 relatable situations where fear of making mistakes can really creep into our English speaking,
right.
from mixing up words to getting stuck in a grammar spiral,
Yeah,
from talking with our hands to feeling lost when someone's speaking a mile a minute. We've covered quite a bit. And I think what's so valuable about these scenarios is that they each come with a practical and creative tip for overcoming those fears.
right.
They're not just theoretical concepts, they're
Mhm.
actionable strategies.
Exactly.
So instead of dreading those moments when we might stumble or make a mistake,
Yeah,
we can actually look forward to them as chances to practice, experiment, and have a little fun with the language.
absolutely.
Because let's face it, making mistakes is inevitable. It's part of the learning process.
It is,
It's how our brains learn and adapt.
for sure.
So it's not about striving for perfection.
Not at all. It's about embracing those imperfections and using them as stepping stones on the journey to fluency.
In fact, there's research that suggests
Oh, really?
learners who are less afraid of making mistakes actually tend to progress faster.
Interesting.
They're more willing to take risks, experiment with the language, and put themselves out there,
Yeah,
even if it means making a few blunders along the way.
that makes sense.
I can see that. When you're constantly worried about making mistakes, you hold yourself back.
Right.
But when you embrace those mistakes as part of the process, you free yourself to learn and grow.
It's like walking on a tightrope
Okay.
with a safety net versus walking on that same tightrope without one.
Okay.
The fear might still be there, but the safety net gives you that confidence to take those steps, knowing that even if you stumble, you won't fall.
What a great analogy. So if we can shift our mindset from fear to curiosity and even playfulness,
Yeah,
those oops moments become less about failure and more about discovery.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And remember, you're not alone in this journey.
Yeah.
Every single English speaker, whether they're a native speaker or not,
Right.
has made countless mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
It's part of what makes us human.
Right.
It connects us through this shared experience of learning and growing.
So ditch the fear, embrace those oops moments, and have some fun with English.
Exactly.
Who knows what amazing discoveries await us on the other side of that fear?
The possibilities are endless. Speaking of possibilities, I'd love to delve a bit deeper into one of the points we touched on earlier, the idea of fluency versus perfection.
Okay. Yeah.
I think this is a concept that trips up a lot of language learners.
I agree. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that we need to speak perfectly to be fluent.
Right.
But that's not really what fluency is all about, is it?
Not at all. Fluency is about being able to communicate effectively,
Right.
to express your ideas clearly and confidently, even if you make a few mistakes along the way.
Right.
It's about the flow of conversation,
Yeah.
the ability to connect with others and share your thoughts and experiences.
That makes a lot of sense. But why do you think we get so hung up on perfection?
I think it's partly because of the way we're often taught languages in traditional settings.
Right.
There's a strong emphasis on grammar rules, vocabulary lists,
Yeah.
and avoiding mistakes.
Yeah.
This can create a sense of pressure to perform perfectly,
Right.
which can actually hinder our progress. It's like we're so focused on not making a wrong step that we forget to enjoy the dance.
That's such a great way to put it. So how can we shift our focus from perfection to fluency? What are some practical steps we can take?
One of the most powerful things you can do is simply start speaking more.
Okay.
The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become with making mistakes and learning from them.
Yeah.
Think of it like learning to ride a bike.
Okay.
You're going to fall a few times
Right.
before you find your balance.
Right.
The same is true for language learning.
So it's all about embracing those stumbles as part of the learning process.
Exactly. Another helpful tip is to focus on the message you want to convey.
Oh, okay.
rather than getting bogged down in the details.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to use the correct grammar or vocabulary
Right.
that we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Right.
Remember, the goal of communication is to be understood.
Yeah.
If you can get your message across clearly and effectively, even if it's not perfectly grammatically correct, you're succeeding.
Okay. That's so reassuring to hear.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us, myself included, need to give ourselves permission to make those mistakes
Uh-huh.
and to learn from them. It's all part of the journey.
It is. And I think it's important to remember that fluency is a continuous process.
Okay.
It's not a destination that you reach and then you're done.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you're constantly developing and refining as you continue to use the language.
Speaking of continuous development, one of the things that really resonated with me from the list we're exploring is the idea of using creative strategies to boost confidence
Okay.
and make learning fun.
Right?
You know those suggestions about turning practice into a game, using humor and embracing the charades? Those really stood out to me.
I think those strategies are so powerful because they tap into our natural desire to play and have fun.
Right.
When we're enjoying ourselves, we're more likely to be engaged and motivated to learn.
Yeah.
And when we're less stressed and more relaxed, our brains are actually better able to absorb new information.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's
Yeah.
not just about being effective, it's about finding joy in the process.
Exactly. And that joy can be incredibly contagious.
Right?
When you approach language learning with a sense of fun and enthusiasm,
Yeah.
you're more likely to inspire others to do the same.
So if we can find ways to make learning English feel less like a chore
Right.
and more like a game, we're setting ourselves up for success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think those creative strategies can also help us to break free from those limiting beliefs that we often hold about ourselves as language learners.
You mean beliefs like, I'm not good at languages or I'll never be fluent?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those beliefs can be incredibly powerful and they can really hold us back from reaching our full potential.
Yeah.
But when we start to see language learning as something fun and enjoyable, something that we can experiment with and play with,
Yeah.
those beliefs start to lose their grip.
It's like we're giving ourselves permission to be playful
Right.
and to embrace the journey rather than focusing solely on the destination.
Precisely. And I think that's such an important shift in mindset to make.
Okay, so we've talked about embracing mistakes,
Yeah.
shifting our focus from perfection to fluency,
Uh-huh.
and finding joy in the learning process. What other insights can you share about overcoming the fear of making mistakes in English? What else did you find fascinating in the list we're exploring?
One of the things that really struck me was the emphasis on the importance of community and connection.
Okay.
You know, several of the strategies on the list involve interacting with others,
Right.
whether it's practicing with a friend,
Yeah.
using humor to connect with someone,
Yeah.
or asking for clarification in a conversation.
Why do you think that connection is so important?
Well, for one thing, it reminds us that we're not alone in this journey.
Right.
Everyone who learns a new language faces challenges and makes mistakes.
Right.
It's a universal experience.
So it's about normalizing the struggles
Yeah.
and celebrating the small victories together.
Exactly.
Right.
And when we connect with others who are also learning English, we create a supportive environment
Right.
where we can practice, share tips, and encourage each other along the way.
That sense of community can be so powerful, can't it?
Absolutely. It can provide a sense of belonging, motivation, and accountability. And it can remind us that language learning is not just about acquiring knowledge.
Right.
It's about building relationships
Yeah.
and connecting with others on a human level.
I love that perspective. It
Yeah.
really highlights the social and emotional aspects of language learning.
And those aspects are just as important as the cognitive ones.
So finding a community of like-minded language learners can be a game changer.
It can definitely make a huge difference.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We've talked about embracing mistakes, shifting our focus from perfection to fluency, finding joy in the learning process, and the power of community and connection. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on this topic. What key takeaways would you like our listener to remember?
I think the most important message is that fear of making mistakes is a normal part of the language learning process.
Right.
It's nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, it can be a sign that you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone
Yeah.
and challenging yourself to grow.
That's such an important point.
Yeah,
It's about reframing that fear
right.
as a sign of progress, not a sign of failure.
Exactly. And remember, there are so many creative and effective strategies you can use to overcome those fears
Right.
and make the learning process more enjoyable and fulfilling.
So don't let fear hold you back. Embrace those oops moments, experiment with different approaches,
Yeah.
and find what works best for you.
And don't forget to connect with others who are also learning English.
Right.
Share your experiences, support each other,
Yeah.
and celebrate your successes together. Yeah, you're not alone on this journey.
It's been so interesting talking about all these situations where that fear of making mistakes pops up.
Yeah.
You know, from mixing up words to that whole grammar spiral, talking with our hands, that feeling of being totally lost when someone's speaking so fast.
Right.
We've covered a lot.
We have?
And it's cool how each scenario has such a practical and creative tip to get past those fears.
Yeah, I think they're really actionable.
Right.
Like you can actually use them.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
instead of dreading those moments when we might mess up,
Yeah.
we can actually look forward to them as chances to practice, try things out,
Right.
and just have fun with English.
Exactly.
Because let's be real, mistakes are going to happen.
Yeah, they're inevitable.
It's part of learning.
Uh-huh. It's how our brains figure things out.
Right. So it's not about being perfect.
Not at all. It's about going with the flow, using those slip-ups as stepping stones to become more fluent.
And actually, there's research on this.
Oh, really?
People who aren't as afraid of messing up actually learn faster.
Yeah.
They're more willing to take risks. Try new things with the language to put themselves out there,
Yeah,
even if it means making a few mistakes along the way.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I can totally see that. If you're always worried about being perfect, you hold yourself back.
You do.
But when you accept those mistakes as part of it, you free yourself to actually learn and grow.
It's like imagine walking on a tightrope
Okay.
with a safety net versus walking on that same tightrope without one.
Okay.
You might still be scared,
Right.
but that net gives you the confidence to take those steps.
Yeah.
Because, even if you trip, you won't fall.
What a great way to put it. So if we can change our mindset from fear to curiosity and even playfulness,
Right?
those oops moments become less about failure and more about discovering new things.
For sure. And remember, you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
Every English speaker, whether they were born with English or learned it later, has messed up tons of times along the way.
That's true.
It's part of what makes us human. It connects us through this shared experience of learning and growing.
So let go of the fear, embrace those slip-ups, and have fun with English.
I love it.
Who knows what we'll discover on the other side of that fear?
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of possibilities, I'd love to dig a little deeper into something we mentioned earlier, the idea of fluency versus perfection.
Yeah. Okay.
I think this is something that trips up a lot of people learning languages.
I agree. It's so easy to think we need to speak perfectly to be fluent.
Right.
But that's not really what it's about, is it?
Not at all. Fluency is about being able to communicate well, to express your ideas clearly and confidently.
Right.
Even if you make a few mistakes here and there,
Yeah.
it's about that flow of conversation,
Right.
being able to connect with people and share what you're thinking and feeling.
That makes sense. But why do we get so stuck on being perfect?
I think it's partly because of how languages are often taught in traditional ways.
Right.
There's a big focus on grammar rules, lists of words,
Yeah.
and not making any mistakes.
Uh,
This can create a lot of pressure to get it all right,
right.
which can actually stop us from learning.
Yeah.
It's like we're so busy trying not to step wrong that we forget to enjoy the dance.
That's a great way to put it. So how can we shift gears from perfection to fluency? What are some things we can do?
One of the best things you can do is just start speaking more.
Okay.
The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll get with making mistakes and learning from them.
Right.
It's like learning to ride a bike.
Okay.
You're going to fall a few times
Right.
before you find your balance.
Yeah.
Same thing with learning a language.
So embracing those stumbles is part of the process.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Another helpful tip is to focus on what you want to say,
Okay.
not getting lost in the details.
Right.
Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to use perfect grammar or fancy words
Yeah.
that we miss the big picture.
That's true.
Remember, the point of communication is to be understood. If you can get your message across, even if it's not grammatically perfect, you're doing great.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us, me too, need to just allow ourselves to make those mistakes and learn from them. It's all part of it.
It is. And it's important to remember that fluency is an ongoing thing.
Okay.
It's not like you reach a finish line and you're done.
Right.
It's something you're always working on and getting better at as you use the language.
Speaking of always working on it, one thing that stood out to me from this list was using creative ways to feel more confident
Okay.
and making learning fun.
Yeah.
You know, those ideas about turning practice into a game, using humor, embracing those charades moments. I
Yeah.
really liked those.
I think those work so well because they tap into that natural part of us that wants to play and have fun.
Right.
When we're enjoying ourselves, we're more likely to be into it and want to learn.
Yeah.
And when we're relaxed, our brains are actually better at taking in new information.
Makes sense. So it's not just about being effective, it's about finding the joy in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that joy can be contagious.
Right.
When you approach learning English with fun and excitement,
Yeah.
you're more likely to inspire others to do the same.
So if we can make learning English feel less like a chore
Right.
and more like something fun, we're setting ourselves up for success.
For sure. And I think those creative ways can also help us break free from those negative beliefs we often have about ourselves as language learners.
You mean beliefs like, I'm not good at languages or I'll never be fluent?
Exactly. Those beliefs can be so strong and they can really stop us from reaching our full potential.
Yeah.
But when we start to see language learning as something fun and enjoyable, something to experiment with and play around with,
Right.
those beliefs start to loosen their hold.
It's like we're giving ourselves permission to be playful
Right.
and enjoy the journey instead of just focusing on the end goal.
Exactly. And that's such an important change in mindset to make.
Totally. So we've talked about embracing mistakes, shifting our focus from being perfect to being fluent,
Yeah.
and finding the fun in learning. What other insights do you have about overcoming the fear of making mistakes in English? What else in this list stood out to you?
One thing that really hit me was how much it emphasized community and connection.
Okay.
A lot of the strategies involve interacting with others,
Right.
like practicing with a friend,
Right.
using humor to connect,
Yeah.
or asking for clarification in a conversation.
Why do you think connection is so important?
Well, it reminds us that we're not alone in this.
Yeah.
Everyone learning a new language faces challenges and makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Something we all go through.
So it's about normalizing the struggles
Yeah.
and celebrating those little wins together.
Exactly. And when we connect with other people who are also learning English, we create this supportive environment
Right.
where we can practice, share tips, and encourage each other.
That community feeling can be so powerful.
Absolutely. It can make you feel like you belong, keep you motivated, and help you stay accountable.
Mm.
And it reminds us that language learning isn't just about learning stuff.
Yeah.
It's about making connections
Right.
and relating to other people on a human level.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
It really brings out the social and emotional side of learning a language.
And those are just as important as the thinking part.
So finding a community of people who are also learning English can be a game changer.
It can definitely make a huge difference.
Okay, we've covered a lot in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've talked about embracing mistakes,
Yeah.
shifting our focus from being perfect to being fluent, finding the joy in the learning process,
Right.
and how powerful community and connection can be. Before we wrap up, what are your final thoughts on this? What key takeaways do you want our listener to remember?
I think the most important thing is that fear of making mistakes is normal when learning a language.
Right.
There's no need to be ashamed of it. Actually, it can be a sign that you're pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone
Yeah.
and challenging yourself to grow.
That's a really good point. It's about seeing that fear as a sign of progress,
Exactly.
not as a sign of failure.
And remember, there's so many creative and effective ways to overcome those fears
Right.
and make learning more enjoyable and fulfilling.
Don't let fear stop you. Embrace those mess-ups. Try different things.
Right.
And figure out what works for you.
And don't forget to connect with others who are learning English too.
Right.
Share your experiences, help each other out,
Yeah.
and celebrate your successes together.
Right.
You're not in this alone.
It's been awesome exploring all these different sides of fear and how it shows up when we're learning English.
Yeah, it's been really interesting.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, out of all the strategies we've talked about, which one's really stuck with you? Was there anything you've already tried or maybe something totally new that you're interested in?
I think it's so cool how each of these tips encourages us to look at things differently.
Right.
Instead of seeing mistakes as roadblocks, we can view them as stepping stones,
Yeah.
even as opportunities to be creative and have fun.
So true. I'm thinking back to that translation trap we talked about. It's so easy to get stuck in that habit of constantly translating in your head.
Right.
But the idea of playing that game where you describe things in English without relying on your native language at all,
Yeah.
that seems like a game changer.
It is. It's like a brain workout. You know,
Okay.
you're exercising that English muscle directly.
It's like we're rewiring our brains to think in English.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
And that's where the fun comes in. We can approach this rewiring with a sense of playfulness.
Yeah.
Almost like a puzzle to solve.
Right.
We can experiment with different techniques,
Yeah.
find what works best for us, and even laugh at ourselves along the way.
It's like turning language learning into an adventure.
I love it.
I'm also thinking about the tips for dealing with fast speakers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've felt that panic before when someone's speaking English a mile a minute.
Oh, yeah.
But remembering that it's okay to ask them to slow down, to focus on those keywords.
That's empowering. It gives you a sense of control in those situations.
It does. It shows that communication is a two-way street.
Hmm.
It's not just about passively listening and trying to absorb everything.
Right.
It's about actively participating, asking for clarification, and making sure that you're understanding and being understood.
So it's okay to take ownership of the conversation.
Exactly.
To make sure it's working for both people. I love that.
And remember, even native English speakers sometimes need to ask each other to repeat things or to slow down.
Right. It's totally normal.
It is.
So we're all in this together, navigating the intricacies of language, even native speakers.
We are.
And speaking of navigating, I think one of the biggest takeaways from this deep dive is that fear is a natural part of this journey.
It is.
It's not something to be ashamed of or to try to ignore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, as we've discussed, fear can actually be a good thing.
Right.
It can help us grow.
Yeah. It pushes us out of our comfort zones, encourages us to try new things.
And ultimately helps us become more confident and fluent.
I agree.
So it's about recognizing that fear is there,
Yeah.
but not letting it control us.
Right.
It's about using it as fuel to move forward.
And remembering that we have a whole toolbox of strategies to help us.
Right, like turning practice into games, embracing humor, asking for clarification, connecting with other learners.
Exactly.
We're not alone in this.
We're not. The more we use these strategies, the more confident we'll become, and the less that fear will hold us back.
So true. It's like any skill, the more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with one final thought. Which of these tips speaks to you the most right now? Which one are you excited to try out this week?
Pick one that sparks your interest and just give it a go. See how it changes your mindset, how it helps you approach those oops moments with a bit more confidence and a lot more fun.
Because remember, the goal isn't to be perfect. It's about making progress, connecting with others, and ultimately finding the joy in communication.
Happy exploring,